Hi zusammen, nicht erschrecken, wir werden jetzt gleich mal auf Englisch wechseln. Und zwar geht es um eine Mentoring-Teilnehmerin von mir, die kommt aus den USA, die Graycee. Und dadurch, dass sie aus Minnesota kommt, gibt es ein bisschen eine Zeitverschiebung und natürlich auch ein bisschen eine andere Sprache. Ja, und obwohl das ganze Kursmaterial natürlich auf Deutsch ist, habe ich das in den Sessions dann ihr halt erklärt und übersetzt. Und das war eigentlich überhaupt kein Problem, dadurch, dass halt alles so simpel und Schritt für Schritt aufgebaut ist. Ja, und sie hat halt innerhalb von dem Mentoring-Programm auch wirklich sehr coole Sachen gebaut. Bin schon sehr gespannt auf das Interview und was sie uns da jetzt gleich alles erzählen wird. So, hi Graycee.
Hello,
Nice to have you today.
nice to be here.
Please tell us a little bit more about yourself. So, who are you and where are you from?
I've never really been good with the who are you question.
Yeah, let's start easy with your name.
My name is Graycee. I am a resident of Minnesota, and I have lived in Minnesota all my life.
Yeah, Minnesota is
And
quite far away from Austria, I think. About eight
yes,
hours or something, time difference.
yes, I would like personally, I would really like to travel out there someday. I have so many places I want to see on like that side of the world and stuff. One day.
So, how can we imagine where you are living? Is there like a mountainous area? Is it more rural or is it inside a city?
So Minnesota is very complicated. If you can think of like weather that can't make up its mind on what it wants to be, that's Minnesota. Um, like in the spring, for example, we were flip-flopping between sunny, cloudy. One day it was snowing, the next it was raining and it was sunny. And that's just kind of how it is, like summertime, it can get really hot, and then next thing you know, the next day or two are really cool, and the weather's just really
I see.
unpredictable. But
Hmm?
it's really pretty. Lots of like nature places to go, and honestly, that's like one thing that I think if I moved, I would probably miss the most, just because it's so pretty here. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, you got to deal with the bugs and stuff, and the snow, the winters are rough. But I mean, it's not like living in constant sub-zero temperatures. So if you can tolerate it for like 4 months, you're golden.
Ah, doesn't sound too bad. I think for us the weather is only in April really unpredictable, but in the winter it can also be really cold and a lot of snow, but only in the more higher up places. So for us it's like not so much of a problem, I guess.
That sounds nice.
And I think what's really interesting for everyone that's listening now is, so what was your starting point before you became part of our mentoring program? So could you already code something or how was that?
Um, so I had a background in graphic design, and when I was taking my degree, or during my degree, I should say, um, I had a coding class, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Java, but
Hmm.
this was way back in like 2013. And so it was a very long time ago. Needless to say, I haven't retained much of it. Um, and then in my 3D background as an environment artist, like with the game art degree, they don't really teach you much for coding. I think the most that took place was they offered some tutorials, like if you were far enough with your project and you wanted to dabble a little further, they had some like video tutorials that they could show you for, coding within um, Unreal Engine if you wanted to. But I think that was kind of as far as it
Hmm.
went. And I never got that far because my project always kept me extremely busy and I had a
Hmm.
hard enough time keeping up as I was. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because I also have a background in 3D animation, so I know where you are coming from. And for us, it was the exact same problem. So everybody knew how to create 3D stuff, to animate things, to create cool environments, but how to create gameplay, how to create games. And that was really unclear at the time. Yeah.
Right.
And so you already mentioned Unreal. Did you also use Unity, or what kind of software did you use there?
Um, so we typically used, as they said, industry standard stuff. So we work typically with Maya, and Unreal Engine was our go-to game engine to use. Um, More recently, since I graduated, so like within the last I guess 6 to 10 months, give or take, I've had a little more experience working within Unity, but not enough to like really know what I'm doing for for certain.
Okay, so when you started, you didn't have that much experience with coding, but you used Unreal sometime and you also used blueprints probably.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the Unreal blueprints.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. So what's really interesting for me is, why did you decide to join us? Because we have the time difference, we have the small language barrier. So what was the reason behind joining us?
Um, so when you spoke with P1, I just remember thinking like I want to know more. And I felt like you were really seasoned in, yeah, I know you're not the know-all, hail, hail Sebastian, but I feel like you know enough just from your own personal journey, and I feel like you just had stuff that you could share and were very, very knowledgeable from the get-go. And so for me, when I heard you speak and talk about your game, I personally wanted to know more because one of my things that I've been wanting to do is also create my own game. Definitely different in style, just because I think mine would be more having to do with realism and like realistic textures and whatnot, and more of like a first person perspective. But I was really fascinated because of all the coding that went into your game and how you created it from code essentially. And I was like, that is amazing. I want to know how
Yeah.
to do that. Just another tool under the belt.
Yeah, the talk that you are referring to with P1 was about game development, I think. And we
Yes.
talked a lot about our Kickstarter, and I also showed some behind the scenes of Weaving Tides, I think. So I really
Yeah.
opened up the Unity editor and just showed you some things that we created. And I think that's also the thing that I found most interesting when I was still studying game development. It was really fun to see what people created with Unity, with Unreal, and see behind the scenes. So I think
Right.
that's always really fascinating.
Yes. And that's something that I personally have been wanting to get more into is game development. Um, just like if I could, I would literally open up a book and just absorb all the information. I wish it were that easy. Like I want to know everything about everything, and the 3D industry is just like I don't know, there's just so much to it and it's so fascinating, and I just want to know how to do
Yeah,
everything, and sometimes I feel like that could make me probably implode, but uh
yeah, I think you chose a really difficult topic for that. I think it's really a big topic, especially 3D and game development, and
it
there's
is.
so much new stuff happening all the time, so you
Exactly.
can't really know it all. Yeah, but that's
But
part of the fun. I think you also want to grow and to learn, to make new experiences, and for that, it's great.
exactly.
So you already mentioned your first person game with a more realistic style. My next question is, do you have any other concrete goals that you aim for? So is there this one big goal that you want to achieve?
I think personally, I just would like more self-improvement in my own skills as a 3D artist. And I think having projects to do and just kind of like learning from my own experiences, I know that it will make me like a better artist in general. So that's kind of what I'm gearing for, is just like kind of having my own personal journey and discovering more about myself as an artist in the 3D industry. And I guess just taking it one day at a time until I can look back and be like, yeah, I've come a long way.
I think you can already think like that.
You're right. You're
So if
right.
you know how to create 3D stuff, it's awesome. I also really like to have that skill to visualize your own ideas and make it visible to other people.
Right. Yeah, I remember my first time working in Maya and just kind of like getting a hang of how to use Maya for the first time. And it was the most like trivial thing. Like they gave us pieces of a Mr. Potato Head that somebody had modeled, and we were supposed to put them in place. And that was
Okay.
that was such a hard task for somebody who has never used
Challenge.
3D software before. But it was still so much fun.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I think a lot of people give up early because the learning curve, if you have very big dreams and visions at the beginning, is really steep. So if you want to create that special character or the big city, and you are still new to 3D software, it's not the best goal to have, I guess. So maybe a lot of smaller projects and finished projects, and when you have learned to finish projects, you will have a much better time doing 3D stuff.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, that's also something I learned from my own experience. So a lot of big projects that took way too long.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always been one of those people who bites off more than they can chew, and then I pay for it later.
Yeah. Yeah, the big question for me, of course, is what did you achieve through our collaboration, through our mentorship program? So is there something that you can do now that you couldn't do before, or something that is more clear to you now?
I learned a lot actually, just from, our simple starter assignments where, like the day and night scene. That was really fun for me. I had a lot of fun with that one. But I think I really struggled with like doing too much, and eventually like I had to take a step back and be like, okay, what is the assignment? The assignment is this. Stick to the plan.
Stick to the plan.
Yes. And I was like, I can always come back and make it more advanced if I want to, because what I took away from that taught me how to do something like that in the first place. And so that's one of my favorites, I think, probably, along with later on in the program creating the like the Where's Waldo kind of theme game.
Yeah.
Where I made little Pac-Man ghosts, and I was like, find the odd one out. That one was really fun for me too. But I took a lot away from the program, and I'm having like all these things fly through my head at once, and I'm like, okay, brain, slow down.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it was also a learning experience for myself, because after I did some of the missions with you, so at the end of our sessions, we most of the time have a mission, so it's like your homework that you can do.
Right.
And I had to actually translate them to English, of course, and I also tried to make it more narrow, because I realized that if I let it be quite open for interpretation, you're going to put so much effort and work into it. I mean, they are really cool projects, but yeah, you shouldn't get burned out from these simple homework missions.
And just taking it one step at a time too. So like if the bigger picture looks like it's too much, just break it off into smaller sections. And that was something that helped me a lot too. So
yeah, that's actually also a really important skill to have. So
it is, yeah.
If you've learned to take complex problems and break them down to little solvable problems, then that's awesome.
I'm not perfect at it. It takes some reminding, but it's a skill.
Yeah, and the thing that you talked about, I think, with working a lot and even being a workaholic is very common in the 3D and games industry because we love what we do. So we really have fun when we work on a project and create our little worlds and interactive characters, and you have to watch the time.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because I can't count how many times I've sat down to work on a project, and next thing I know, 3 hours is gone. And 3 hours feels like nothing when you're working on a project. But eventually, that 3 hours feels
Yeah.
like an eternity. And then next thing you know, you don't want to work on your project anymore. And you're like, okay,
The next thing you know, it's dark
right.
outside.
Like, make sure to squeeze in some extra things, like go for a walk, go hang out with friends, do
Yeah,
something. Yes,
eat
exactly.
something.
Eat, drink, take a nap.
How would you describe the mentorship program to other people? Because a lot of people I talk to, they don't quite get what it is all about. So it would be really interesting to hear your answer to that question.
Okay. If I had to break down the mentorship program, I would say, one, you're a great mentor. Two, I would say that it's a program that teaches you about coding, but you start small. Like where we started, it was simple things that challenges you, but also teaches you at the same time. And so like you definitely come out the other side of like your beginning lessons learning something, and then obviously as the program progresses, you get more of a challenge as you go. But the stuff that you learn along the way, like it really just gets more fascinating, at least for me, from a personal view. Like I always found the next lesson to be more fascinating than the last. But like everything was so intriguing to me, like everything that I learned. And then, towards the end, you start getting more into game mechanics and how the coding functions within a game. And you start thinking about all the games that you've played. And you're like, huh, interesting. Because it's kind of like lifting up the hood of a vehicle and you can like see everything and learn how it ticks. And, that was probably like, I don't know if you've seen that meme of that guy that like finds something that he likes, and like as the meme progresses, each image is just getting like more crazy, and like his mind is just being blown 10 times over. And it's just like it's kind of like that. Like you start out and you're like, whoa, mind equals blown. And then by the end of it, like there might as well be like a picture of like a nuke going off, and that's your brain. Because you're just like everything that you take in, it's just, I don't know, it's crazy fascinating to me.
Crazy fascinating. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, but I think the picture
Yes,
with opening
yeah,
up the hood of a car is really good. And also, I think the finding the fun in the simple things is what actually helped me to learn coding. Because when I started, I really wanted
exactly.
to create big games and I didn't know where to start, and I quit a lot of times. And when I finally made it, the thing for me was to keep it simple, because even with very simple mechanics, you can already create all kinds of games. And this is so fun and fascinating. And if you play other games, you start realizing it and you start thinking, how could I use that for my own game?
Exactly. Yeah, that's something like everything that I've learned so far, I'm constantly thinking of how to implement it in the game that I want to make. And I have a feeling that future classes with you could help with that more. This is the groundwork, the foundation, and the building blocks that you need essentially to go from zero to having knowledge about coding and being able to implement it.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points. One that I want to go back to, you said that it's really the beginning, so it takes you away from zero to hero or to game developer.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing, because when I started or when I'm looking at YouTube and other stuff other tutorials now, they most of the time don't start at 0. So they start somewhere at 10 or 20 or in the middle, and you can't quite learn to code when you start in the middle. So you have to learn the basics, and the basics can be fun. And that's basically what I tried to create with this beginner's course. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And the other thing too is like I personally have looked at stuff on the internet of how to code, but the thing about trying to learn stuff through the internet is that it's very scattered and everybody is on a different level, if you will. And so while they're trying to teach people how to do things, it's not necessarily at the level that you need it to be. And some people are better at explaining things than others are too. And that is something that I really struggle with when I'm trying to learn new things or just watch tutorials on how to do stuff with 3D modeling or environment art or even coding for that matter.
Hmm.
And so for me, like this was like I've watched coding videos and I've tried to follow along, but a lot of the time you're starting in a place where you don't quite understand what's happening or why you're doing it. And sometimes people don't always explain the why you're doing it. And so it can't like it's not always very educational, I suppose. But like for me, this program and the lessons that you were teaching, like you started from like literally step one and you just like climb the ladder from there. So like you explain things very well, and if I had questions, like we literally would go on detours from our lesson to answer the questions that I had. And so
Yeah,
like go ahead.
I just want to say that I remember this one lesson where you challenged me. So there was this example where we just created some, we used a loop to create a graphic more than once.
Yes.
So a lot of graphics in a pattern. And you asked me, how can I make that pattern look like that? And then it was quiet for a while, and I thought, that's a really good question. And the next few minutes I was working on it, and then when we finally got it, it was a really cool experience for me too, because I also learn from your questions. And I think the most important difference to any tutorials that you mentioned is that it's not a one-way street. So you really have a person to talk to, you can ask questions, you get feedback, and I think that's the fastest way to learn something.
Right, yes. And another, additional factor too is that one-on-one, like you had mentioned. Like, I don't think there are words to describe how effective a one-on-one can be with somebody, like somebody who's dedicated to helping you learn and specifically attuned to you and you only. Like there's nobody else, they're not worried about their time constraints. And that was something that I experienced with you. Like we had a scheduled time and you could answer the questions that I threw at you. And we could just like sit there and like work on it. And then I had this time to myself to just kind of like process all this information that we took from the lesson, and then I could like work on it on the side. And then additionally, if I had questions outside of our time, I could just go to Discord and throw my questions in the dojo. And then, somebody would get back to me or you would get back to me and give me tips on how to proceed if I got stuck.
Yeah, that's a really simple and flexible way, I think. Yeah, because you can also be part of the mentoring if you have, for example, a full-time job, or if you don't have that much time, because we can just schedule it some time around your schedule.
Right. Yes.
So one of the last questions. This is also one of my favorites. So were there any surprises for you? I think for me it's always enemies. So I always thought enemies are so difficult to create, and when I finally realized that they are not that impressive and they don't have that cool AI behind them, they are just like a few simple scripts put together and you already have an enemy. That was a really big surprise for me. So were there any surprises for you?
I remember that enemy lesson, and I remember thinking the same thing. Like, you kind of ruined enemies for me, but like in a good way. It's like I was learning how they function, and I was like, that is so cool. And yeah, that was
Oh, I'm so
definitely
sorry. If you see an enemy in a game, after that lesson, you're just, oh, I know how that works. I can defeat you.
right. Yes. And I remember like, because like in the new Pokemon games, if you get too close to a Pokemon, it'll attack you. I don't know, like say Taurus, for example. Um, it's a bull, and so it'll like do that hoof thing that they do where they're getting ready to charge, and then it'll charge you. And I'm like, that is so cool. Like I can picture the mechanics in my head and almost like imagine what the coding would be like. First you have the startup where the like you script in this feature where it like prepares to attack, and then next thing you know it's charging you. But if you get further enough away from it, then it'll leave you alone. And you can see that in the game too. And it's like, oh my gosh, I know what's happening. That's so cool. But I mean, there were other things too that kind of threw me for a loop. Like I think we had made a project about the ocean, and it was just like layers after layers of colors, essentially like these circles. And I was like, is this what people do? I'm like, how many people do like when I look at an ocean scene, what is it made of? I'm questioning everything now.
Yeah, for our listeners, so it's just a side view of ocean waves, and it's really easy to fake that or to cheat if you just have a few rotating ellipses, and it's a lot easier to calculate that than to really calculate the formula of ocean waves.
Yeah, that was.
And game developers are cheating all the time, so it's no big deal. Yeah, talking about big ocean waves, I mean, this is the perfect, this is perfect for our next question. So what is the biggest obstacle for newcomers to become game developers? Is there a thing that you think is the typical point where they have a lot of problems?
I think that there are a lot of people out there who either are aspiring to become artists and don't know where to start, or even game developers in general. And it's really easy to just not know where to start. And a lot of people can't afford to go to school too, but you can self-learn. I think I would highly recommend that versus going to school, because there are some schools out there that are more affordable. But if you can teach yourself, one, that's super rewarding. Two, you don't owe like 60 grand by the end of it.
Yeah.
And with you, like you have affordable prices for teaching too. Like, you dedicate your time and everything for these lessons, and that's super awesome as like an option out there. And one of the things, going back to what I was trying to say, is that I remember asking you like, how can I perfect my portfolio? And I remember you saying like there is no such thing as perfect. And this is something that I really struggle with too, because like I am 100% a perfectionist. And so I'm always trying to improve myself, improve my work. And I think that that's another thing that people can get really hung up on while trying to get into game dev, is like shooting for the stars, making sure that things are perfect. And like you gotta make mistakes along the way. Like there's no such thing as perfect. Everything is a learning experience.
I think you can ask every game developer if their game is really finished, even after if it's released, and they always have more stuff they could add or more things they could polish. But sometime you have to say, now it's finished and I'm moving on to the next one.
Exactly. Yes. And as you said, like perfect does not exist. It just doesn't.
Yeah, perfect is just subjective. So every person has a different kind of definition for it. So it's a struggle and we all have it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think in that last answer, it was a really long one, but I think there were so many good points for people that are just starting out with game development, with learning 3D. So yeah, thank you for that already. And we have one more question left. So whom would you recommend this course to?
It's perfectly fine to start at ground zero because honestly, that's kind of where I started.
That's where everyone started, actually.
Yeah.
Don't forget that.
And yes. And I don't think that you have to be super smart either, because, like, even if you feel dumb, like, this is super fun. Like, you're learning a bunch of information, and sure, like, some of these courses might be more challenging, but you're starting out like at a pace, not to mention like you personally getting to know a person or like someone who decides to take your mentorship program, you're kind of queuing into the person that you're mentoring. And so you can kind of tailor the program to fit their needs and, how they acquire information and how they're like their own personal learning curve as well too. So I don't think that that should hinder anybody from wanting to take this program.
Yeah, really good answers. Thank you so much for taking your time, Graycee.
Yeah, no problem.
And if you, dear listener, are now interested into this course, I can just recommend write to me. I'm on Instagram. You can find me with my name. So my name is Sebastian Ranker. So in English, Sebastian Ranger with double G. And otherwise, you can also visit my homepage, which is www.spiel-entwickler.de in German, but I will also link it in the show notes. And thank you so much again, Graycee.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Yeah, so have a good time and see you soon. Bye.